Ready? Play.
Good afternoon, good evening, good morning, whatever time it is in the world, wherever you're tuning in from. Steve is tuning in at just past noon on Sunday, the 19th of January, and he's looking pretty sporty, actually, Steve. I don't know if you're en route to the gym or en route to the tennis court or coming back from one or the other.
The former, not the gym in my home, you might say.
Okay.
I've got an exercise bike about 15 feet away, and I'll get on that as soon as we're done.
Good. Exercise bike is certainly very tennis related. We see these guys. I remember Rafa after the 5.5 hour final or whatever
Oh
it was
my
against
God.
Medvedev, and then they get on the bike afterwards, right?
It's incredible. I couldn't believe that. He was on the bike and he was greeting Rod Laver. He stopped for a
That's
minute
right.
to greet Laver. But that was mind-boggling to think that he could possibly have the strength to pedal twice.
Yeah, right, exactly. But it's a sort of a tennis thing that these phenoms, as I've heard them described in reference to Rafa, Roger, and Novak, the dedication to this sport. Well, of course, we've got some pretty dedicated individuals we're going to be speaking about now, the quarterfinalists on the men's side. Tell you what, let's begin with Tommy Paul against Alexander Zverev. What have you made of first of all Alexander Zverev's sort of path to the quarterfinals? I will just sort of go through these matches he's had. Pui had in the first round straight sets. Martinez the same. Fernley as well. He dropped a set today against Hugo Humbert, but he's had a pretty serene path to the quarterfinals. What have you made of it?
I like that description. It has been. It has been, and that's not a word we normally associate, serene,
No.
with Sasha Zverev, because at these majors, he tends to get himself in some of these tumultuous 5-set matches, sometimes of his own making, but he's been very good so far. And even this one against Humbert, he lost a 6-2 second set, but then he got right back with it, and it was a very comfortable win in the end. So I like the way he's playing, and like the way he's conserving energy, because let's face it, when he lost the French last year, one of the things he said, he'd led Carlos 2-1 in the finals and lost in 5 and didn't play very well the last 2 sets. Carlos picked it up and deserved it. But one of the comments he made was his legs were pretty shot in the 5th set. Well, that's the product of a long fortnight and long matches, and there's a lot of reasons for that. And but here he has been really efficient, which I like. So if I were in his camp, I'd be pretty happy.
If we think back to a year ago, and I think this is possibly part of your thinking with Zverev leaking sets, just to go back to a year ago, first round, 4 sets, second round, 5,
Right.
third round, 3, fourth round, 5, quarterfinal, 4, semifinal, 5. So there was only 1 straight sets victory. You could argue this year his route, at least until Humbert in the 4th round, is probably a little bit softer than a year ago. But I remember Cam Norrie probably should have beaten him in that 4th round.
Absolutely.
He
absolutely should have beaten him. No, this has been, it'll make a difference, because I think the match with Tommy Paul could be, I know you want to go through Tommy's path to the quarters as well, but Tommy is going to test Sasha physically to the hilt, I believe, in very strenuous baseline exchanges.
Agreed. Looking at Tommy's route to the quarters, he knocked out O'Connell in a 5-set battle. Actually, Tommy often does get involved in 5-set battles. Am I right in thinking that Tommy in New York a few years ago had 3 consecutive matches that went 5 sets?
I think so.
Yeah.
It's very common with him. It's very
Yeah.
common.
But he's fit as a fiddle.
Very fit, yeah. And in a lot of cases, I have to say, Tommy, since he doesn't have that big weapon that Sasha does on the serve, you can understand why he'd get himself in some of these extended, protracted battles. I think, and sometimes his draws have been tough. But what's interesting about him here, John, is that as soon as we saw the draw, as soon as I saw it, and I bet you probably agreed, that you felt like there was a pretty good chance, if he's in form, that he'd be right where he is. He'd be in that quarterfinal with a chance to make the semis. Did you feel that way?
Yeah, but maybe you could accuse me of sleeping on Tommy Paul a little bit, in that sometimes I forget or sometimes I remember. Tommy had a run at the semifinals 2 years ago in Australia.
Yes. Right.
And so I'm wondering what you think about players that seem to just like either the conditions or the environment or even the stadium or the routine. Certain players just seem to turn up at certain tournaments. And of course, you and I know very well that it can often do with the court speed and all the rest of it. But is there also just that familiarity of being in the environment? Oh, I've gone deep here, every year for the last 3 years, or I've done well here in the past. And that does also give you a little bit of confidence too.
Couldn't agree more. It's true of the very top players. It's true of a Novak going for his 11th title here, or Rafa with the perennial victories in Roland Garros.
Yeah.
You feel very comfortable in the setting. And Tommy happens to be an excellent hard court player too. He should have been in the semis of the U.S. Open a couple of years ago. I thought at that stage he should have beaten Ben Shelton, but that's another story. Bottom line is he got to the semis here 2 years ago, as you said, and played a pretty good first set against Novak, 5-1 down, back to 5-all, and then he got beaten soundly from there. But yes, I think that familiarity that you mentioned is very important for somebody like him. And then I suspect he did have a little look at the draw. I don't know. Every player is different that way about being superstitious and not looking ahead. But I would think he felt like, okay, these are guys, if I'm playing my best, these are guys I can beat.
Sure. Looking at the head-to-head, it might surprise a few people to see that Tommy has a 2-0 advantage over Zverev. Those two matches, both coming on a hard court, albeit maybe both of those hard courts in Indian Wells and Acapulco might be a little bit slower than in Australia, although I am hearing this year that the court speeds are a little bit down compared to other years. But Indian Wells is famous for being gritty and slow.
Yeah.
Acapulco, I don't think is the quickest either. I know Rafa tended to do well in Acapulco in the past, even on the hard court there. But yeah, 2-0 is the record that he has, albeit that last one, Indian Wells, was both 3 years ago, and it did go to a deciding set tie break. So
Yeah.
there's some room for optimism for Tommy, right?
Yes, I agree. The first one I don't put too much stock in. Maybe he caught him off guard a little bit so long ago, and then you're right. Then the last one, the Indian Wells with a tiebreaker in the third, could have gone either way. And we don't have a pattern yet like we started to see last year with Fritz and Sasha.
Yeah.
Where Taylor knocks him off 4 times, and you're seeing it's happening repeatedly, and that does mean something. It really does start getting in your head, and you lose to him at Wimbledon and the Open, and I mean, those were big bruising defeats for Zverev, and this is different. I think it's like they both, but from the standpoint of Paul, it's important, John, because, it gives him some belief going in. He knows Sasha's had a great tournament. He knows what Sasha's record is overall, and he feels like, okay, the guy, he's the number 2 seed, and he earned that ranking last year with how solid he was all year long, but I'm not afraid of him. I can compete with him. So I think they both actually go in with a pretty bright outlook.
Definitely. What is your feeling, therefore, overall in this clash? Are you leaning one way or another, or maybe convincingly one way or another?
Not convincingly, no. I'm glad you put it that way. No, I'm leaning just slightly Zverev on experience, on how well he's played here. He should have been in the finals a year ago, and he beat Carlos and let a 2-set lead get away against Medvedev. And he's done well in all the majors. He's got great experience at all of them. So not great at Wimbledon, but the other 3 he's done really well. And so I feel like that's gonna help him. That he's serving well, that he's playing well, that he's pretty rested. And I just feel like if he stays at the level he's been at across the tournament, I like him in 4 or more likely 5 sets, because we have great respect for the way Tommy is playing as well.
Yeah, I'm probably going towards 4, Zverev in 4. I do think he is playing well, but he is someone who just every now and again will have. I mean, I know there's other players on tour that do this too, but it feels a bit more common with Zverev that he is someone that will just have a surprising loss from time to time. Maybe Tommy Paul wouldn't quite fall into that category, given the respect that we have for Tommy. One final thing I want to say, though, on Zverev is he is someone who's hung on to the coattails of Yannick and Carlos as they've been flying past. They've flown past Medvedev, and Carlos, pretty much owns that head-to-head. Yannick has twisted that, of course, drastically around in the last 18 months or so. You think of the same with other players of a similar standing, Rublev, for example, and some of these others that are sort of Tsitsipas. Again, it's just very difficult to look at a match between Tsitsipas and Carlos and trying to figure out a way that Stefanos can win. And I think Stefanos knows that too. And I think it's part of the reason why he's quite down on himself at the moment. And yet, Zverev is one that has hung on. I remember a post-match interview on court, which seems to be a bit of a theme of today, but we'll probably come to Novak in a second. But an on-court interview that Zverev gave in the French Open of 2022 when he beat Carlos there. And he basically said what we were all thinking. I've won today, but these guys are coming past, Carlos and one or two others. So, I've won today, but probably, down the road, I'll have to take a few losses. And yet he has hung on for another 3 years. And I think he'll be there. Do you see what I mean? There's a lot of, positivity about where Zverev is compared to some of his, equals, if you like.
Yes, despite some disappointing moments over the last few years, and obviously some opportunities missed, and going back to the 2020 U.S. Open against Thiem, where he's 2 sets up on a breakup, and later served for the match in the 5th set and very tight tiebreak. Then the 5-setter with Carlos at the French last year, which I thought he was in pretty good shape when he went up 2-1, but we saw what happened there. So I do think the way he's played steadily over the last year, I mean, really all through last year, and the way he's now starting now, there's some stability there that previously was not the case. And secondly, I like the way he seems to be hugging the baseline and being a bit more aggressive off his forehand. I don't like it when he hangs back and tries to defend off his forehand. We know his backhand is one of the best in the game, but to me, the forehand is the key, because the serve hardly ever lets him down these days. Again, he got rid of those woes in the past of far too many doubles and being extremist on the second serve, either going for 135 or miles an hour or 82 miles an hour. It was kind of crazy. He's got all that sorted out. So I'm convinced that he'll serve well. But I think that they're going to probe each other on the forehand side, because that's another make or break shot for Tommy too. I think that Tommy's got a terrific forehand, but if there's a shot that's going to go, that's it. So I think they both will test each other a lot off the forehand side. And in the end, I think, again, Sasha sustains the standards we've seen from him over the last week. I like his chances, and you seem to too. But boy, it's an intriguing, and I guess you would also share my view. You won't be a bit shocked if it happens to go Tommy Paul's way in 5 sets. I just favor Sasha.
All right, just as we sort of drift across to the next quarterfinal, one thing. Listen, I love to see drama, and I love to see some chaos in a draw. I love to see upsets and newbies arriving, and we have still seen that this year. But equally, I like a draw that is total chaos. That's fine, with 8 players outside the top 10, if you like, in the quarters, or we still have a few solid ones or big ones. Then we've definitely got those big guys still in the draw, both in the women's side. So I'm going into these quarterfinals. Some people are still in the 4th round right now, and the 3 or 4 favorites on both women's and the men's are still there. And I think that sort of helps us with this. I mean, the 4 main ones, it's not exactly rocket science to say Zverev, Djokovic, Alcaraz, and Sinner. They're still there, and they're still on their collision courses. If you enjoyed this video, make sure you hit that like button. Don't forget to subscribe and click that notification bell so you don't miss out on all things tennis.